Ready to go?
Check.
All right. Welcome to the Everything You've Got podcast. I'm your host, Hussein. Today is an inaugural episode for a lot of things. First one on video, and my first guest that I've had in quite a little bit of time here, but I'm super excited to have him on the show. I do know him personally, a very good friend of mine, but we're going to have a conversation today that him and I have probably not had in private in terms of the in-depth conversation we're going to go through, because he's got a very, very unique story when it comes to this aspect of his life. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring him on is because this city, not just this city, there's this global pandemic outside of the whole, the health issues that are going on with COVID and stuff. What's come along on top of that is this issue with mental health, and people are struggling. And I know him personally. I've seen him overcome what he's had to overcome in such a graceful and genuine and honest way that I think sometimes, instead of getting professional advice or professional help, speaking to someone who's done it, gone through it, and overcome it may be a bit more helpful. So without further ado, let me welcome my good friend, Jeand Raisi. Should we run with JR today?
Either or, bro.
Okay, we're going to go with JR because I think it's just a little easier. It's easier to brand too. No,
there you go. Yeah, JR's cool.
Yes. So, I gave you a little introduction. I think most people, I didn't really explain exactly what it is that you overcame, exactly what it is that you went through. So I'll just kind of toss it to you if you want to open up about, what it is that you did that you overcame.
Well, first and foremost, I'm blessed and grateful to be here, bro. Saying thank you so much for having me.
No, man.
Right?
Thank you. It's so gracious of you to come on to even talk about this, because this is it's not easy to open up about this.
But you have a powerful movement, right? And any way I can support it and raise awareness, raise education, because one of the real pandemics that's happening right now in our community, in the shadows, right? That gets overlooked is addiction, right? Addiction, mental health issues that are happening within our community, within our the backbones of our friends, family members, right? Co-workers. It's all over the place. If you're driving around and there's prevent overdose or stop overdose BC type of thing, right? But do we really talk about it? And that's one of the things, I guess, you were talking about in the intro, is that I got blessed to be able to overcome my addiction issues, right?
Right. And, that's what I was hoping to dive into a little bit. There is a ton of conversation around how we tackle this, how we as a community, as a group, as a city, as a government, as on the federal, provincial, municipal level. I think there's all these different conversations happening, but that conversation's been going on for a long time. It doesn't seem to resolve anything. And that's why I wanted to just focus our conversation today much more on the individual, which is, lo and behold, you. So I've obviously, a lot of times when people think of people who go through addictions and, suffer through addictions and try to overcome, the story usually falls in this way that, they had some sort of issue growing up, some sort of, terrible trauma that they went through, and suffering through addiction is a byproduct of some unfortunate event that they went through their life, whether it be sexual abuse or some sort of trauma that was induced upon their life. But I've known you for quite a long time. We grew up with kids together, and as far as I know, you had a pretty decent upbringing. You come from a loving family. Obviously, every family has their issues and stuff, but for the most part, you come from a loving family. You had a very stable upbringing. How does someone like you, with that type of background, end up in a situation where you're struggling with addiction?
It's a really good question, actually. I think one of the biggest things, because I've worked with a lot of guys and gals in addiction and in the recovery community, and most of it's childhood trauma, some sort of trauma like you're talking about, right?
Right.
And I was always trying to dive deep and figure out, where's my trauma, right? What happened that caused all this stuff, right? You always want to try to figure out the root causes. And through the process of self-discovery, right, and my journey, because today we can go off the wall and talk about government policy or this and that,
right?
But like you said, we're gonna focus on me,
right?
And I guess I can only speak about myself and my journey and my experiences, right? And if people can relate or identify, by all means. But with me, in terms of that, is I guess having a lack of a positive male role model.
Right.
Because what ended up happening is I'm the oldest of four.
Right.
So through that, I guess we came to the country when I was 5.
Right.
2 of us were born overseas, and then 2 of us were born here. So we have 4 kids in total. So when I came here, my parents, I'm first generation, right? So my parents being from Pakistan, Iran, Balochistan, which is where we're from, and that ethnicity, coming here was a huge culture shock. So them being raised there and then us being raised here completely had a disconnect, right? So we would have to, I guess, learn how to be a certain way at school, learn how to be a certain way at home, learn how to be a certain way at the mosque, be a certain way with my colleagues or my my friends that I play sports with, right? My soccer team, my basketball team, like all these guys, and having a different face and a different mask at all these different arenas growing up, you kind of lose yourself.
So
who am I?
You had different masks everywhere you went.
Yeah, right? I had to be a certain way here, be a certain way there, a certain manner, and then, and also there was a little bit of confusion in my house in terms of, I guess, hey, are we faith-based or are we not, right? Because like my dad coming from Iran, there was a huge disconnect with religion because religion was shoved down their throat and inflicted with fear, right? If you don't do this, this will happen.
Right.
If you don't believe, if you don't go to, the mosque, if you don't wear the hijab, blah, 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 right? Whereas my mom grew up more in Pakistan and there was more of a progressive liberal side of things where like you don't have to wear hijab. You won't get stoned to death, right? But there is still like the religious aspect, right?
That was your mom's side.
That was my mom's side. So coming to the country, my dad had stepped away from religion in a sense, right? He got, he had to assimilate and adjust and survive in Canada.
Right.
So me seeing my dad like that and my mom still believing in like, Islam and God and everything. And all of a sudden I didn't end up at the mosque until I was 10 years old. So the first 10 years of my life, moving from country from continent, country, province to a different city. I moved 10 times before I was 10.
Wow.
So every single time I had to adapt and seek acceptance and validation.
Right.
Wherever I had to land, I had to fit in. I had to have you like me. So that means another face had to get added, another mask.
Right.
So through that, every layer that I had to go through or add on or subtract, like I said, that was, I guess, like the self-identifying trauma, that lack thereof, and then not having a male role model, a positive male role model, because we went from having living in a certain lifestyle to all of a sudden my dad losing the business or changing lifestyles, and we end up in BC housing for a portion of my life, and then so now I'm looking up to the older kids with the nice cars, beautiful women, the cash, right? The guys who have all the shiny stuff. And most of those guys were the drug dealers or the guys that had power, prestige, money. And then you're watching rap videos and all these movies, and those are the guys, right? The guys that had the shiny things. So I was chasing materialism at such a young age and seeking respect from the people who, I guess it was the wrong crowd, right? So mixing in with the wrong crowd, you have to do different things, difficult things. So that was, I guess, self-inflicted trauma through being or seeking acceptance on the streets. Right? Yeah. Validation from the wrong crowd. Right? That's usually what happened.
Right. You mentioned that you didn't have a positive male role model. What was your relationship with your father like growing up?
Well, that's a really good question. We had an amazing relationship, but I almost like as a child being like, I guess, self-centered, there was this deeper resentment at a subconscious level. Why do we have to keep moving? Or why do we have to keep doing this? Why can't we just stay in one place? I just hadn't made friends. Why don't I keep...
So these things you're saying, were these conscious conversations you're having at that age, 9, 10, that's building up resentment?
Well, that was inner dialogue.
Inner dialogue.
Right? So inner dialogue. So that would basically... We never talked about stuff. We never talked about feelings, right? There was no breakdown in our household, right? Mom would just rub everything or throw everything under the rug type of thing. And then, long story short, we had to internalize it somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
That chaotic household situation, I feel like is such a... I don't know if it's a common thing, but I feel like a lot of immigrant families that just came and landed here, especially in the early 90s, which I came from, It's very common, very common. You're coming to a brand because I opened up by saying, hey, you grew up, you had both parents in the house, you had siblings. It seemed like, at least from the outside, it appears to be quite a stable upbringing. So how do you end up in this situation? I think what you're saying, so far what I've got is, the appearance, yes, our parents always, they did their best, right? But it's that chaos that was going on the inside of the home, I guess, a lot of different things that kind of breed all of this, where you start to look for some escapism on the outside world. And what you're saying is that you landed in looking for some acceptance amongst other males, other guys outside in this materialistic outlook. Right. And I feel like a lot of people go through that. I know I did, but I'm still like looking for the bridge or the disconnect between growing up in chaos, at the household, parents are fighting, all these things.
Yeah.
And going all the way into, I guess, falling off the deep end into addiction. Where does that moment happen in your life?
It became a slippery slope, right?
Right.
Mixing with the crowd, gonna blend in, and at home, our parents were trying to be religious, right? My dad came back and became more connected with Islam, and was like, you know what, you guys shouldn't drink, shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. And then I grew up watching him and some of my uncles and family friends drinking and smoking opium and all that kind of stuff, because that's how it was, right? There was addiction in my family already. So when we talk about trauma, when I went back home for the first time at 13, after 10 years, being here from 4 years and then all of a sudden 13, so almost a decade not being back overseas, and then going and seeing addiction there, real addiction in Baluchistan. So that's another aspect of, I guess I didn't really touch upon. Right. Seeing that, whoa, I do have very successful family members, and I have also family members like my grandpa, my dad's dad, smoked opium till the day he died, every single day. Kind of like when people are smoking weed here, there's opium. So I had an opiate switch on the genetic side.
Right. So I've heard that argument where people, say that it's a genetic thing. So you did have addiction in the family. You're not the first one to suffer with it.
Long line of addiction, especially because I guess we can get into politics and blah, blah, blah. But like I was just keeping it on me in a sense so we can stay hyper-focused. Because I can digress. We can both digress. Our conversations will just go, man. We can be sitting for hours, and next thing you know, we're talking about 20,000 things. But that like seeing that, whoa, these guys are going to Friday prayer, and then they come home and now they're drinking tea at night and smoking opium.
And you saw this growing up?
Yeah, well, you see that, and then all of a sudden you're at a friend's house, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to church," and then you come home and they're getting liquored up, and then all of a sudden you have some friends, dads who are bikers, or they're gangsters, or you have people in the drug trade, or some sort of shady stuff in their own family.
You came to Canada when you were 5 years old. So when you're seeing this back home, I don't know exactly what age we start to formulate our first memories, but I guess it's around that 3-4 years old.
Yeah.
So you're being exposed to this. So you still remember this?
I was born and had my first couple of years moving around quite a bit within Pakistan, right? Part of my family's from the slums. So in the slums, there's addiction. There's violence, right? There's a lot of things that you watch in the movies here, like, on the wrong side of the tracks in the States, right? Most of the movies, like Detroit or wherever, right? LA, Compton, quote unquote, right? Like all of those places have that kind of, I guess, stereotype attached with them.
So with all of this movement happening, like in your life, physical movement, literal physical movement, like you're going from school to school, place to place, as you can start to, even out here in Canada, was that stressful is my first question. And I have a follow-up question for that right after.
No, for sure. Like they say that having a stable upbringing in one place will cultivate a very normal child, right? In a sense, because that stability is massive part. Having, like you said, the mother, father, everything, but also stable location. Growing up with the same kids in the same elementary school, same junior high, middle school, same high school, blah, 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 right? You're growing up with the same people, so there's not much of a change. But if there's constant change, then that could hinder not just your development, but also you get other life skills. But like I said, for me, it was always seeking validation and to fit in.
Right.
Because now I have to fit in with a new group. I have to prove myself.
Yes.
So every single time I have to prove myself. Sports was a big part, right? Playing sports.
Yeah.
I had to fit in because I was a small brown guy.
Yeah.
Most of the schools were a lot of white guys, right? And then different races. Even though I grew up with there was a huge cesspool of different it was very multicultural. We're blessed on that side. Like imagine coming in the 70s, 80s, or 60s, right? Some other earlier brown families or Middle Eastern or African, right? Or South American. But with us, you went to Toronto, you were in Toronto, and then you came to Vancouver. So for you noticed, there is multiculturalism, but at the same time, with the schools I went to later on in, let's say, in the Tri-Cities,
right,
it was
that's where
predominantly white, Asian, Persian. In some aspects, or high school was more blended in, but yeah.
So with all of this movement, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but with all of this movement and you're moving, do you think you developed a coping mechanism to deal? Was it stressful? You said yes. Did you develop a coping mechanism to deal with the stress as a kid and internalized it? And what was it if you did have one?
Yeah, I believe the coping mechanism was seeking attention. For me, I wanted you to see me. So, for example...
Were you getting it at home? Like, were your parents giving you attention, or were they caught in their own chaos?
Well, that's the thing, right? When you're the oldest of four...
Right?
Like, when I was born, all of a sudden I'm one and my sister's born. So, all the attention goes to my sister. So, at a subconscious level, in your first, they say a child in the first 1 to 3 years, that's a lot of development happens. 4 to 5, a lot of development, right? So, now all of a sudden my mom's focused on my sister, my younger sister. So having that, now her attention is there. I need to seek attention. So I was always breaking things or doing this and that. And then all of a sudden we come here and there's a third child added. So less attention to me. And then a fourth child added like a couple of years later.
Right.
So less and less attention to me.
Right.
I was very respected at home, but then that trickled into getting in trouble at school.
Right.
I had high grades. I didn't do bad on the scholastic side, education, but I was always getting in trouble because I needed validation and attention. So that was my way of coping.
Right. Attention seeking.
Attention seeking.
So this is so good. So that bridge then, that bridge between now, so you come to Canada, your parents are trying to make a life for themselves, trying to raise some kids. They don't have that much time to give you all the attention. Then now you got competition for attention. You got siblings and stuff being born. So you go out in the world and you start to seek it. Now you come into adolescent age, let's say like your preteens and teens and teenagers, you graduate high school. What is that like? Like what I say is I always felt like, from 0 to 15 is where you're collecting all this so-called trauma as a child. And then from 15 to 30, that's when you get to act it out. So what is acting it out?
Bigger kids pretty much, right?
Right, yeah. Well, it's like you collected all of it, now you get to act that out. And then at 30 plus, now you get to start to think about, okay.
For guys, well, depending on women.
I think it's similar. From 0 to 15. I mean,
we're definitely mature sometimes, right? Or women sometimes are more mature or mature at a younger age compared to some of the guys. But then again, everyone's different. That up as a toss-up,
but I mean, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. That's another topic for another day. But so now you're entering your adolescent age. You're in your 20s, let's say. Yeah. What's happening now? Like, what's the acting out's happening at this point? If you are acting out, I don't want to see.
Yeah. No. The thing is, I tried to change my life many times. I tried to be like, you know what? I think I'm going on a wrong. Like my trajectory is heading in the wrong direction.
When did you realize that? When did you realize the trajectory for your life? How old were you?
Well, when I got kicked out of my high school at 15 years old, I was just finishing grade 10. No, I just got kicked out, and I was supposed to go to an alternative high school.
What'd you do?
And we can bypass that. That'll be for another podcast.
Hasn't it been long enough?
I'll go too deep. I'll go way too deep. No, long story short, I was blending in with the wrong kids, right? They were trying to steal a car out of the school parking lot.
That's not too bad.
That's all right.
Play some Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, yeah, play some GTA in the school parking lot during school hours. Anyways, one of the kids gets caught. We all got away, but then, important. There's always one fat kid that gets caught. That's how it usually rolls. Excuse my language.
For going with a fat kid.
I know.
Was it you though?
No, I was a very fast runner.
Yeah.
No, I can get away.
Right.
No, but
so when you come home that day from school and the teacher tell you, he's like, your parents like, what the hell are you doing? Did they not ask you that?
Oh, obviously.
Right,
like, you know, I was not comfortable having to have the school call my parents all the time. But see, that was, I guess, me making those decisions. It always comes down to your decisions, right? We have a decision. We always get the forks in life.
Right.
Like, can I say yes to this person or say no? And I became a yes man through that people pleasing and having to, have you like me. So I'll say yes.
Right.
You want to go do this? Yes.
Right.
You want to do that? You want me to go over there? Yes. Right. That kind of thing. And obviously you gain more respect from the older guys. Oh, buddy got this car, right? Buddy's got that. Buddy moved this, blah, 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 right? That's like on the block to have that respect or to be able to fight or blah, like all that kind of stuff adds up, right? So when I was in that moment, in that pinnacle of like, whoa, I got kicked out.
Right.
I got kicked out. I've shamed my family name, right? That's like in our culture,
right?
Like, you've definitely thrown shame on it. And I'm luckily blessed that I had good grades, that another good school took me.
Right.
I got a lot of second chances. I got very lucky and blessed to have those chances, that people didn't give up on me. Some teachers that either had their own lived experience or could understand in my adolescence, like, yeah, let's not give up on this kid.
Right.
And a lot of those people were placed in my path, not just in high school, but even afterwards and in my, addiction story and my whole journey.
Right.
I've always been blessed to have people that entered my life and didn't give up on me or gave me second chances, right? And those second chances definitely led to one day, me being like, I got to change it fully. So to back to your question, my first time trying to change everything was when I was 18.
Right.
I was heavy in the game. I was doing quite well. But my justification was I want to go to school, so I need to pay for it. And my parents aren't wealthy enough to pay for my school. I don't want student loans. So let me do what I know how to make money really fast. So, and then that got really deep and deep and deep.
Excuse of sorts to kind of and you kind of started walking down.
Yeah. And plus I've seen like I said, lack of a proper male, idol in a sense, right? You're looking up to the wrong people. Right. My dad did an amazing job.
Yes.
Always got me to read the right things, gave me the right advice. But obviously for me, when you're in that sergeant and cadet type of dynamic between parent and teenager,
you're going through a rebellious phase.
Yeah, right. That's what you do, right?
Yeah,
you're just like,
So for the sake of time here, so I would just ask you that this question. We were talking about how it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right, and you're like, it's a slippery slope between where you started and how you ended up. Where do you think the slippery slope started? Like the first step that you think like, okay, this is what got me going into the wrong direction, to the point where you had your first, interaction with a narcotic. And what was that time frame like?
Yeah, no, my first big, epiphany saying that, I got to stop. Well, I started drugs at 16.
And what was your first one? If you're open up
to get into most of 15 would be weed, right?
Yeah,
but it's not really a drug.
Yeah, yeah.
But, and then it went into cocaine, and then it progressed, right?
Right.
It's like party just on the weekends, that kind of thing.
Right. We're talking 15, and then you jump into your first narcotic at how old?
I don't know if cocaine's considered a narcotic, but some places it is, some places it isn't, right? But cocaine was 16. Right? 15 going into 16, actually. So it's still around 15, 16. And then that got to the point that when I was 18, after high school, and I'm doing a lot of shady stuff, making a lot of money, and it became an everyday occurrence as opposed to just a weekend warrior.
Like the cocaine.
Yeah, cocaine. And then obviously at that time going to raves, Molly, all that kind of stuff, right? All the party drugs.
Right.
But then when you're by yourself doing it, I was like, whoa, you know what?
Right.
What have I done? My parents have come here. They've given me such a blessed life. They've worked so hard, and I'm 18 years old over here, counting cash, counting this, counting that, and I'm the oldest of four. Like my mom, obviously we never ever talked about what was happening, but I could see in her eyes whenever I'd go home or go to their place and be there for an hour a day type of thing and be back out. All of a sudden, like, you know, seeing the look on her face was one of the biggest turning points at that time. I was like, wow, you know, I've let her down.
Right.
I've let, like, the one woman that she never gave up on me either, except towards the end, right? Where, like, that's where my story leads to is I'm like, you know what? That look of disappointment in your mother's eyes, you're like, whoa.
Right. Right.
You know, like that
guilt probably.
Oh man, that pitiful feeling inside, right? You're like, wow, like how could I be such a bad son? How can I be such a bad older brother? Never there, right? So that being said, I was like, I gotta change everything. I thought I did. At 18, I was like, you know what? Drop it all. I left what I was doing and then I went overseas. I thought maybe geographical change would fix me. Right. So I ended up in Egypt, out of all countries. I went there and I was there for about a year. I stayed clean. I didn't touch a single drug. I quit smoking. I quit everything, quit drinking, right? And like for a year went and it was almost like a soul
how old
searching.
Are you at this point?
That's 18 going into 19.
Right. And how long were you in Egypt for?
A year.
So you came back at 19.
Came back at 19.
Right.
Actually, my 19th birthday was in Mecca.
Wow.
So I was doing Umrah. So that's like if anyone here doesn't understand Islam, it's like doing a holy pilgrimage to like the holiest city in Islam, which is Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Right. So I was there for 19. So I was totally blessed to be able to have these spiritual experiences. But you know, it wasn't enough to keep me. I still had this emptiness inside, this disconnect. You know, like I wasn't done yet, I guess. I hadn't hit a bottom sufficient enough. So when I came back, within a couple of weeks, you know, having a couple of drinks with the boys, that led me right back to the cocaine and the partying and the women, all that kind of stuff
like
that came with
slippery
it.
slope. It's not that hard.
And then just kept going. And then through the years, to fast forward, literally, it is progressive because that loneliness or that emptiness inside or that void that a lot of people have vices for, right? That you want to try to escape. Like you're talking about escapism, escaping. What's your coping mechanisms? And my coping for my unmanageability of that void. I didn't know what to do. I'd put different women in that void, tried to fill it up, different ways of making money, different faculties for school, for studying, different types of cars, tried to move multiple times. Geographical changes. Right. I finished school at BCIT. I remember I was living in Richmond. You came over, right? I moved there so I could stop doing cocaine because one of my friends went to treatment. He went into his rehab center on the island, and I was like, okay, I'm going to move. That's going to fix me again. Right. But like every time I'd move, I'd go with me.
When did you? Yes.
Right?
Sorry.
That same guy with the same void would end up in just another place.
Yeah. And you know, I heard this crazy. That's so crazy because I remember hearing this once where I was going through my own issues in life and trying to solve them, and I just realized, and then I heard this. I forget where it was, but someone says like, wherever there was a problem, there I was. So you've talked about, you know, coming back. You had this, you know, epiphany of sorts at a young age, very young, and you go overseas. You have this pilgrimage of a rebirth of sorts. You come back. And then you fall right back into that life. When and where was rock bottom? Was there a moment, like it was just the pit of it all, and you're like, okay, shit, like I'm in a place where I think a lot of people, when they start doing like narcotics and stuff, I have two questions for you, actually. I want you to tell me the first time you did a heavy narcotic, I guess said outside of cocaine, how did that feel? And when was was there a moment where you're like, okay, I'm out of control with this. I think it now has control of me. And that's, to me, that would be the beginning of like, holy, I'm in rock bottom. When was that? And how did that all play out?
So remember earlier when I was talking about geographical changes, changing my location, thinking that was going to fix me, but ending up there as me again, right? So through that process, I was in I went to Alberta, came back, and then when I was here, it was a slippery thing. I had like a back injury And then I got a hold of like painkillers,
Mm.
right? And then painkillers are opiates. And then that's where and I was telling you that in my genetic makeup,
Right.
opium back home is like weed. So I
Who
guess.
gave you the pain? Why
the
were you
switch-
taking painkillers?
Well, I had an injury. Like a back injury, and I'm like, oh, I gotta it helped.
Right.
And it also, I didn't know at the time. I thought I was just using it for physical ailment, right? But it helped me come off the cocaine in a sense that, hey, like, I don't want to be wired. I can be able to level it off with something else.
Right.
And then, which was less of a come down, and like, it wasn't as intense. And whoa, it's like almost like I had that feeling of I've arrived with opiates, right? And then that opiates definitely started increasing. And then that's when oxys were out, right? And then oxys and fentanyl was just getting into the scene, was coming on. So that's where that started. And then I tried a couple of different times, right? And then I got introduced to a 12-step program back in 2016. I had a roommate. We were traveling around Alberta, and then he had gone to rehab, and then we were living together, and he ended up seeing my patterns, right? I'd go and party, and I'd show up at work on a Tuesday. I'd always skip Monday because I was still trying to recover from the weekend, right? Like, I go hard in the paint. I did, like, you say everything you got, I gave it. Everything I had.
Watch you on the show, man.
It took it all.
Living example of the everything you've got motto.
Pretty much.
Sometimes in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I went in that, but hopefully we're back on the right trajectory. But so that was where the start of that, when I was talking about that slippery slope, right?
Right.
When it was like, whoa, that moment of like, that void was filled momentarily when I was like, ooh, I felt complete.
Right.
If that makes any sense. Like, that vice had arrived, that I was able to still go to work, still function, and thinking I could balance it all. And then I was always used to having those different masks. Right. So back to the childhood. So now I'm in my mid to later 20s, and I have a good 6-figure corporate job. I'm living back in downtown Calgary, got my own place with my roommate who's very successful and working for a big accounting firm. And I have a shady side.
Right.
So I'm very ambitious. So basically I was still doing shady things, still moving and selling drugs on the side, having a corporate job.
Unnecessarily, because you have the income.
But the thing is, one of my vices was always wanting more.
Right.
Not having enough, or that fear of losing it. So I always need to have more.
That's so interesting.
So,
is that really a vice? Is what I think. But I mean, continue. Yeah. Is that really a vice?
Who knows?
Wanting more, never enough.
Yeah, and that's where my addictive personality comes in, right? Not having enough, and then obviously stresses and unmanageability of my emotions and feelings, because I've never been taught how to manage them.
Right.
I never had a productive coping mechanism, right? Never went to a psychiatrist or a counselor growing up, or never had those healthy conversations with my mom and dad or family members. Well, how do you process this feeling, or how do you process that anger or resentment and blah, 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 right? So that is where I hit my rock bottom, is then my opiate use skyrocketed.
Right.
Not just to like, on the weekends or here and there. It became an everyday thing. Again.
Right.
It went from oxys now to the harder stuff.
How old are you at this point?
I was about 26.
26. So now we're coming in on like a decade loop here.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So when you say it's a slippery slope, and it was the trajectory. Yeah, it's progressive.
Very
progressive. And it's a trajectory. You weren't kidding. 10 years is a long time.
And we ain't talking about the insurance company, bro.
Right. Well, I mean, at that point, like at 26 years old, and you're on this 10-year trajectory, that's almost half of your life at that point.
At that sense, yeah, because I'm coming up on just the 3 decades. But that's the thing. I thought I was good, because what I was taught was, hey, get those boxes ticked. Go get an education. So I went and got,
at any cost,
right?
Basically,
at any cost, whatever it takes. Go get the education and then get that job, right? So our parents or everyone in our status can be there, like, oh, so and so works for this company, has this position, and has this education or formal background or some sort of certification, right? And it's like, oh, my son's doing this or my daughter's doing that, right? So I got a place and I got this and I got that. So all the boxes were ticked on the outside, other than maybe just before finding a spouse and marriage and blah, 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 right? But in that age, mid-20s, I was like, I'm at a pretty good place, right?
Right.
But internally, it was chaos,
right?
There was always going, and never stopping to smell the roses,
right?
Okay. And
so to fast forward a little bit,
right to the bottom. So
right to the bottom.
So right to the bottom was you saw me. Like actually a couple months right before the bottom. I remember at the hospital. Remember? Like I got into that bike accident. I'd come back because I'd lost my place, lost my car. And I was like coming right to the bottom. I was really close to the bottom at this point. And at this time it was heavy duty narcotics, right?
You know what's so interesting you say that? As much as like I was present there, you know, I picked you up. I just thought you had a biking accident, which you did.
I did have a bike
but it's
accident.
so interesting that you're literally in the bottom and you're going through this internal turmoil. But you weren't kidding when you said about like holding up the masks, because I had no idea. I think
fake it till you make it, right? Like
at that point, I knew something wasn't right. I knew you're going through some stuff, but I would have never guessed it's like heavy narcotics.
Ooh,
you know what I mean? That would have been my last guess. And you've always had this amazing personality. You know what I mean? Very like an extroverted personality in the sense that like everybody knows when Jeand's in the room. You know what I mean? When you're in the room, you have this beaming smile. You know what I mean? You know how to connect with everyone and just do all of that. Was that all just a facade to cover up the pain on the inside?
Like I said, the masks, right? Attention seeking, all that kind of peacocking. Later on, you get into that dominant male alpha mentality. Like so I need to make sure people know I've arrived. So even in my pain and struggles and being at the bottom and just burnt everything down, and I'm going down in flames, right? Every bridge is burnt.
Right. So
except like my family, that they were just lingering on, but they're like, we don't know what to do with our son, right? That's a whole nother subject. Right. How we enable our family members and friends, and most of our culture and a lot of people from overseas and even here too, they don't know how to deal with that, right? Because of the stigma. But back to my bottom, after he saw me, I ended up actually finally accepting defeat. Right after getting kicked, I went to a recovery house, and I was like, I got a problem. I need to get myself fixed. Right, so I ended up at a recovery house treatment center, and there I couldn't even stay clean. I ended up grabbing some more narcotics, some more substances. Right, gave some to my roommate. And
so a recovery house. For people who don't know what that is, how does that play out? Like, are you paying for this? Are you going to is this covered by any sense? Is it free? Like, what's going on here?
Well, I was blessed. Like I was telling you, I was working for a good corporate, a big company, a big Canadian company, right? And I had benefits.
Right, so they covered.
I had benefits, but the thing is, all I had to do was go to some like a couple doctor's appointments, get a note from a shrink, right? And all of a sudden, insurance company, short-term disability, long-term disability. We're pretty blessed. If you have benefits, you can, and it can cover quite a bit, right? HR's got your back if you do the proper route. But me, I was at the very bottom that I didn't even make it to those doctor's appointments. I ended up having actually family member help me out. Gave me like paid for a little quick stint while they were trying to figure out my benefits. But I didn't even last 3 days in there.
Really?
Because it could cost like anywhere from $5,000 a month upwards to $30,000 a month to more of the high end leisure spas. Right? Like there's families. People throw down a lot. So you're saying you didn't even make it. When you say you didn't make it 3 days, was it a financial issue or was it behavioral? Behavioral again, right? I ended up breaking rules, grabbing some drugs, giving some to my roommate, and this loops back around to our opiate crisis,
and
our
overdose crisis. You're supposed to be completely free of narcotics.
You're supposed to be abstinent, like completely clean, not touching drugs, and somehow, some way, I somehow got some.
So you want to share how we made it happen?
Oh God, no! You don't want to know. No, like it was an inner city type of treatment center. It wasn't like somewhere rural or whatever, right?
It's not like a prison sentence. Like you can step outside the building. It's meant so that you're not completely like segregated and away, right? So at least
least you're still in the city, you're still kind of integrated into society, but you're learning how to cope and manage without drugs and alcohol, all that, without substances.
So what happens in this 3 days?
In the 3 days, I ended up running into an old friend in there, right, who happened to be my previous drug dealer too, towards the end of my demise. And then I ended up giving some to my roommate, and I went to one of the house meetings and sit downs, and basically came back, and I found him in the bathroom, overdosed. So we were trying to resuscitate him, Narcan him, naloxone, right? Use that, and basically we couldn't bring him back. He passed away. And then that was on my day 3, and I got kicked out. So they're sending me to a homeless shelter. So this was my bottom.
Right.
I'm like, I can't even stay clean in a treatment center. Right?
That was a friend of yours that you knew?
It was my roommate.
It was your roommate. Yeah. And you gave him the...
Yeah, I gave him some of the dope. He asked for some, and obviously I was reluctant. But at that time, I was still sick, right? Misery loves company is one of the sayings that you hear a lot.
Two people who are addicted in situations. Yeah.
They're trying to help a brother. Like, oh, you're detoxing too? Here, let me help you with your pain. But unfortunately and fortunately, it was one of the biggest blessings that happened with me, because I needed that shock. I'm that kind of guy that if I don't get shooken up to the core, because then it was the day before Mother's Day back in 2018.
Right. So
it was like May long weekend type of thing. And so they kicked me out. And I realized at that moment that I tried to go back to my parents' house, and I was begging my mom to give me another chance, let me move back in and I'll change everything. And then these are the infamous words that she said: you can go live next to a garbage can. I'm done with you. And in our culture, right, if you know anything about brown culture, like if your mom gives up on you or, kicks you out, says, no, you're not welcome here, then that's when you're like, whoa, I've really hit rock bottom. And, getting kicked out of a treatment center, losing all my material possessions, ending up in pretty much a shelter, and then trying to get back into my parents' house, I was like, whoa, this is a wake-up call.
Like the reality of your situation is really...
Everything hit, and I'm like, wow. And, I had tried to, like I said, the geographical changes, I had tried a 12-step program previous to that, but I wasn't ready for it.
Right.
So what ended up happening this time, I said, you know what? I gave her my cell phone, I gave her all my debit cards, and I was like, you know what? Give me a week. Mm-hmm. Give me a week. This is the eve of Mother's Day in 2018.
You're saying this to your mom.
I'm saying this to my mom. I'm like, take all this, keep my phone, keep everything. I'm gonna just dial down and let's do this. So I ended up, it's like Googling 12-step meetings, Googling recovery stuff. I'm like, what do I need to do? Right? And then I started the detox. I started detox in my mom's basement, and I was going
You're just staying away from everything. Detox meaning
detoxing off any type of hard narcotics is withdrawal symptoms,
right?
Especially off of opiates. At that time, fentanyl,
right?
And any type of amphetamines as well, and uppers, which are like cocaine, crack cocaine, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
If you just stop abruptly, especially nowadays with benzodiazepine, any type of benzos that are out there, there's only 2 things that can kill you if you just stop abruptly, which is alcohol. If you're using alcohol heavily and you just stop, you could die. Same thing with benzos. If you just stop abruptly, you will die. You need to taper, right? Or you need to get some medical help, and that's why there's medical detox centers, right? Which most of the people usually go to, because then you're at a medical facility that helps you wean and taper off, right?
So you did take some medically...
Well, I jumped on an opiate replacement program, which was you go see a doctor, they prescribe either methadone or Suboxone at that time that was available, right? And these are things that you would go to the pharmacy every single day, and then you'd get stabilized and then taper off on a daily basis or whenever the doctor sees fit, right? For me, I've seen friends on these opiate replacement programs for years. And it just became an addiction from the drug dealer to an addiction from the pharmacist. But it's meant to be something that helps you not go to the harmful, illicit street drugs and be more on the pharmaceutical stuff, which is safe, but you're supposed to be tapered off, and it's supposed to help you. So you would use it in a detox center or at home or in a recovery house.
So does a cold turkey approach work then?
Cold turkey, it depends on the drug. It
Does it
all
depend on the
depends.
drug, or does it depend on the person?
Both. It's a
Right.
mix of both, but medically, health wise, you will die if you stop cold turkey on heavy alcohol use
Really?
disorder
Right.
or benzodiazepine. Like, so any type, and like in the music videos, they talk about Xannies and
Mhm.
Dillies and this and that, like, and we're talking about Jordan Belfort earlier,
Right.
right? And all those lemons and this and that, right? And Quaaludes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were different type of chemical makeups, but the benzos, and most of the drugs now on the streets have a lot of benzodiazepine in there, which like your regular drugs like Xanax, like quetiapine, like it's clonazepams and azepams and all the pams, right? Like you can just Google this yourself,
I was
but
gonna
like
say, you know them fairly well. I think you've been through the ringer with this stuff. You're just kind of like coming down off of it. So the tapering off process did benefit you, is what you're saying.
well, I utilized it
Right.
for its actual use,
Purpose.
not to be on it for years, right?
Right. So when they gave you this stuff, the tapering off stuff, were you being monitored by anyone 24 hours?
No,
a
I
day,
guess
7
I
days a
was.
week?
I
Or
hit
did
a.
they give you the drugs and they just kind of trust that you're going to be responsible?
So
with
usually, what you would have to do is get a prescription from a doctor, go to the nearest pharmacist to where you're residing, right? And then you would go to the pharmacy every day to get the dose.
I see.
Right, so you'd have to go in the morning or whatever time that you're meant to go. You're supposed to do it like every day at the same
How
time.
does that feel going?
Oh, that's demoralizing, right? You're
Right.
you're going and it's like very shameful, and like for me in the
'Cause the
community,
pharmacist knows what this is.
pharmacist knows, and I ended up having a family friend that being the pharmacist behind the counter at that place, and I had to. Part of hitting rock bottom was also accepting what had happened and what I've gone through, and trying to break through that stigma of my own self-judgment.
Right.
Like, it's okay.
Whatever.
Jeand,
Yeah.
JR, it's okay. You're getting out of this. You're sick. You were sick for a while. So I had to reprogram my mind, because being in the drug game before, you're looking down, oh, look at this crackhead. Look at this, down junkie and blah, 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 right? So you have this preconceived notion of what an addict looks like, or an alcoholic. They're this
Looks
person
like.
that lives under the bridge, right?
That's what you felt like you looked like to the world.
Then so I had that own self-judgment, but the pharmacists and doctors were very supportive. They didn't judge me. They helped me, and then I was very motivated at that time when I hit that bottom, sufficient enough that I wanted to make a change and do anything in my power, anything and everything, and be willing enough to do what was necessary, right?
Right. So 2 questions. In this time where you're taking the tapering off drugs, how intense is the drive to want to do it again on a scale of 1 to 10? And then number 2 is, once the tapering off was done, when did you feel like, okay, I don't struggle with this anymore? Or do you still, like, are there days where it's still like, maybe, does that still come about?
That's a good question. Early on, when I was like, right when I got kicked out and of that treatment center,
right,
in 2018 before Mother's Day, it was a lot more of an obsession and like I guess a craving. The cravings are very intense, and you have to fight them, right? That's why I was like at that time. Because many times in my life previous to that, I would stop for a period of time, right? Stop drinking or stop drugging or stop everything, and then eventually that little voice that was just a whisper of craving became so loud, and then my and that unmanageability and that void internally became bigger and bigger and bigger, and I needed to shut the mind up, or I needed to fill that void, right? So I would eventually go back to the drugs,
right? This was
that cravings, because I didn't have like any type of solution or coping mechanism, or didn't learn how to manage that, right? And so eventually,
the cravings were still intense. At this
cravings were very intense.
I had a teacher tell me that, and you tell me how true this is. She said, when you're in the thick of this, when you're in the thick of things, the desire to not wanting, the desire for drugs is so intense that not taking them is almost like going underwater and then trying to stop yourself coming up for breath.
Pretty much, that's how intense it is, right?
That's crazy.
It's so intense, like in a sense that it's hard to describe it. The only way to know it is to be in it, right? So, like neurologically, every neural pathway is just going off. Alarms are going off in your brain, say we need this. Like your opioid receptors and nicotine receptors and everything, all the dopamine hits that you're getting from, the heavy duty narcotics are just like your brain is craving that. Because all of a sudden, if you stop cold turkey, it is actually a huge shock to the body. Right. And like, this better than anybody else. That chemical makeup inside here, based off the electrical signals that are given off your brain, right? So if this isn't getting it, your body's gonna start being like, you need to get it, and if this isn't getting it, it's telling this part, you gotta go get it, right? Like,
so you're just a robot.
So there's a physical aspect of this, not just mental. There's a physical, and we talk about that later on. Like when I learned more about the disease of addiction, right? When you have both of those just screaming, right? Then
that's such I feel like you'll almost open up another can of worms that I would want to discuss with you and almost debate. Is you called addiction a disease, a disease as in like it's almost genetic. I don't know if I agree with that just yet. And agree in the sense,
but not a genetic disease. Cancer isn't always a genetic disease. Like diabetes could be genetic, or it could just be like nature versus nurture. It's always that same conversation. I said I had the opioid switch in part of me, right, from my family members and my own DNA. But also because of what I've put my body through and got to that point of, I press the fuck it button, right? Fuck it. I'm already down here. Let's do some harder stuff. Right. And then like you're saying that, and the intensity of the craving, or, you would steal, you steal from your own parents and family members. You would sell your own kids to get the next hit, right? Like, you see these people.
Do you even feel like yourself?
Oh no! Like,
so what does not feeling like yourself feel like?
Becomes normal at that point. That's the only thing what's normal is not being yourself, and like you think that's yourself, but it's you're just not yourself. And going back to the question of disease, it's more of a dis-ease, discomfort not having that drug. Because your baseline changes, right? For you wake up, you have you're tired, groggy, you wash your face, go to the bathroom, you make a coffee, you sip on, like, you're still waking up, right? Like, so you're still catching up to, hey, now I'm energized and normal, and I can start being like a productive member of society. Whereas a drug addict or an alcoholic, and anybody that has any substance use disorder, well, basically, they wake up. This is someone's normal. You're already down here. So in order to get here, your body's going through withdrawal, shakes, whatever, right? The cravings. Those, imagine flu-like symptoms every time you wake up. And then your baseline is basically you need to get a hit of that substance in order to just feel normal and not have those withdrawal symptoms.
I see.
So that pain, that fear, the anxiety, that desperation, right?
Just to get to normal, and then as soon as it starts to wear off, you start to sink back down.
Yeah. So you have to keep chasing. But like that's over time. So especially with opiates and benzos and alcohol, right? Like it's very intense, the withdrawal, right? So you're chasing not getting into withdrawal.
Right.
Does that make sense? I just want to make sure.
Yes. In a sense that, like, I think if I heard you correctly, it's like it's this constant, like just refueling the body with the narcotics just to get to a point of existence, survival. I'm alive. Normal. I'm normal, right? And without it, you're just what was not being high feel like? Because I think a lot of people,
painful.
Right.
Painful. You're feeling all your feelings, right? Like
and how quickly does the pain go away as soon as you hit? Is it instant? Or
it's gone right away.
And
like
what is that?
You're numbing yourself. Imagine you're working. You have a habit. You go to work, you come home, And it's like just what you see in the movies or commercials or your own family members or parents. You come home, like obviously our parents are different, but you know, they come home, you crack open a beer and you sit down on the couch and then you take that first sip and you're like, ah.
Right. Just
like you're just like, the day's done, I can relax. And that like, that moment, right? But you need that.
The awe of the beer is probably not as intense as the awe of a narcotic.
Oh,
what is that like? Because you've had a beer, you know what I mean? All had beer. Like what is the, if you could put it into one word or maybe two or in one sentence or less, like the moment when you're in that high, what does that feel like?
Well, it's different for everybody. It's hard to describe it.
Really?
For me, it's. I
imagine the physical reaction that's happening in the body. Is that not the same for everybody?
Well, so basically, let's say all of your fears and insecurities that you feel, and unmanageability of the feelings and emotions, all of that goes away. You feel like you've arrived. You feel like John Travolta in that movie, just walking down, down the street. You're like, I'm the man, right? Like I can do anything. I'm like 6-7 feet tall, indestructible. I can talk to any woman. I can do this. I can do that. Whatever you want, like you're like, whoa, like euphoric feeling, right?
Euphoric.
You feel like you're in a.
How long does that last? Well, I guess in your brain, how long does it last? And then in like, I guess 3-dimensional reality time.
So, it's like you show up to a party and then all of a sudden everyone leaves. And you're still at the party trying to chase that same high, but you're by yourself,
right,
in a dark room.
Right.
So it's like you're trying to use you're chasing that dragon pretty much, right? And then it's like I said, it's hard to describe because I'm being very general right now because each specific drug has its own type of feeling, right? Alcohol will give you a certain feeling. Crack cocaine will give you a certain feeling, right? Methamphetamine, side and down, fentanyl, benzos, they all give you a different feeling, but physically, mentally. But like I said, all underneath all of that is that aha, right? Is that like I've arrived. The
baseline is just you're empty of all your all the anxiety,
all the fears, anxieties. Your brain shuts off. That voice, like that inner dialogue, because every human being has that inner dialogue. At
this point, to me, this sounds like the prototypical escape.
Yeah.
But the escape that a narcotic provides is unmatched. It seems like
it's unmatched. Like you can have sex, for example. You get you bust, you ejaculate, whatever you orgasm, right? And then you're like
that's a term for the streets.
Chill. It's a bust anonymous. No, but that's the thing. Like you get it, you get your hit, and then you chill. You like you go back to whatever, right? You got your hit, and your craving subsides,
right?
But obviously, sex is an addiction too, right? It's anyone's type of vice. Yeah. But then, with the drug,
so far, like when I'm listening, what I've heard so far, I think, by the way, you've done such an incredible job.
I hope I haven't confused you. If any of the listeners, man, honestly, hopefully I haven't,
Well, so if you can tell me, so you've gone through this, you've gone through the withdrawal symptoms. You beat that out, and you're tapering off, like the lure, the attraction from these narcotics to pull you in is starting to, like, I imagine, getting weaker and weaker, and you're starting to develop a sense of identity that's finally outside of these narcotics. At what point did you realize I'm done? I think I've won. Is there a point where you realize, okay, you're like out of the gates of hell, I've won, it doesn't influence me anymore? Or is going through something like this a point where you're free from it, but it's a lifelong battle to just stay away from it?
Those are amazing questions. I'm glad you asked those, right? And imagine being diagnosed. We go back to the disease aspect. Being diagnosed with diabetes.
Right.
You always got to keep in mind what your insulin levels are, right? What your sugar intake and uptick is, and the whole 9 yards. You got to take your diabetes medications, right? Or if you have heart disease, you have to take heart medication, right? So that being said, you got to take care of your health at the same time, right? You can't go eat at an all-you-can-eat buffet with greasy food every day with a heart condition and cholesterol and then expect to just have your medication treat you, right? And then you'll be fine and live a fine and dandy life. No, there's an imminent heart attack coming up. So same thing with this, a disease of addiction, dis-ease. Once you've been in it and you come out of it, like there's a whole, for me, there's a lot of different aspects that I need to maintain.
Right.
Because if for like, I just going to touch upon it, right? Because I had 12-step programs. I've jumped on a couple different modalities that have helped me, right?
Right.
Plant medicines as well,
right.
through that aspect of different journeys. And the three, like when we talk about the physical and the mental, I didn't touch upon, there's also a spiritual side,
right?
Right, that a lot of people overlook.
Right.
And I believe that's one of the most important parts of recovery, of like, you know, dealing with that disease of addiction for the rest of your life, is to make sure you're spiritually fit. And subsequently, I'm wearing a shirt that says spiritually fit, right?
Yeah,
It just, but it means a lot to me, because that's the only way I've been able to keep the cravings down, right? And to be able to maintain not using drugs, because I work in the downtown east side, so I around it at all times, right? And
that is incredible.
And the disease, it's not me, but it's I do a lot, but I also have a lot of help, right? And I have a community, I have a connection, and that's most of the time with addiction is a disconnect, loneliness, hopelessness, despair, right? Fears, judgments, the negative self-talk, negative self-worth, lack of self-worth. All those things combined, right, will definitely keep somebody down there. But I had a lot of people. Like I said, I got a second chances, and a lot of people gave me second chances. And I've been totally blessed with that, right? The 12 steps, different 12-step fellowships helped me, right? And different people, such as yourself too, that never gave up on me, always believed in me, right? My family, good friends. I had like a full aspect of like all these different people come and help me. Just like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to help an addict recover and heal, right? So, and it comes down to making those decisions and the forks in your life. Do I decide to go hang out with this person or call the dealer, or do I decide to go to a meeting, or decide to pray and meditate and go to the gym, eat healthy, right? Reach out to the right people, keep the right people in my thing. So each decision will lead you on that trajectory. So that's the part of beating or being on top of the disease of addiction, is maintaining your spiritual sense, your mental sense, and your physical sense, right? It's a full pronged program, for your, like, you know, self-care.
So at this point, you're saying it is a lifelong. Like once you feel like you've overcome the addictions, you're no longer like, you know, in the depths of it.
Yeah, I'm not waking up every day trying to raise my baseline, or you know, trying to get a hit just to be normal, right? I'm very grateful in that sense and blessed that, you know, I've woken up. I wake up now and I have, you know, I have my own, I guess, structure that I've been taught, and that's been ingrained in me now, right? Prayer, meditation is a big part,
so
right?
You don't wake up anymore with any sort of like craving of sorts to go back into that life.
Well, you know, there's like the odd using dream that you would get, right? That there's like these, I guess it's repercussions, and also like I guess the right word's not coming to my brain. It's been a long day, but you know, it's residual effects of using any type of heavy duty narcotics. Your brain is always going to go through those cravings, so the first 30 days are very, very important. 60 days, 90 days, at those, like, you know, milestone days, your brain is just like, you know, amping up those receptors and firing off on all levels to be like, give me. And once you pass those, you hit different milestones, like 6 months, 9 months, 1 year. Those are like, the first year is very, very difficult because you're rebuilding a crazy foundation, a deep foundation, right? You can't build a high rise without having like a really wide base and foundation and going deep down. Then you can start building up, right? Like trees, like in nature.
The roots got to be deep.
Roots got to go down for many years before it can even start going up. Right.
So how many years are you removed?
Now I've been grateful, blessed for like almost coming up to 4 years, right?
Congratulations, man.
In a couple of months. So it'll be, I'm very grateful. Like, but at the same time, like I said earlier, it's based off the maintenance that I put in.
Right, the work.
Right? Yeah. So I can, if I let the foot off the gas pedal for too long, like not going to meetings or not staying hooked in, or, you know, staying connected and taking care of my spiritual, physical, and mental side, you'll see, because addiction doesn't discriminate. It hits all aspects of life. You walk down, or you drive down, or walk down Hastings, there's lots of walks of life down there that end up down there. Right? There's doctors, lawyers, there's medical professionals, there's construction professionals, developers, business people
that are
on the streets, right? And there's a lot of stories that we can get into. I can tell maybe on a different time.
100%.
But like, you know, it hits everybody, and especially now it's hard hitting like the suburban areas. Right, so it's definitely going up there, and overdose is very, very intense, right? So,
yeah, I mean that's a word that we're hearing a lot.
Overdose. So like one of my most, like, I guess I would like to emphasize this to anybody that's listening or watching this: learn how to use a naloxone kit. Right, carry one with you in your car.
What is naloxone?
Naloxone is a Narcan. So basically, if anyone's going through an overdose, knowing how to use this kit to have a overdose response, whether you could be at a bus stop, you could be at a kids school sports game, you could be at home or at a party or family function, you could just be driving and someone could be overdosing on the street. And if you know how to respond to it, using it, it's basically either nasal spray or administered intramuscular through a needle, right? So you hit almost like an EpiPen. You just quickly prepare it and then bam, jab it into an arm.
Where can someone get something like this?
And most pharmacies have them. You can go ask, and then most, like, say St. John's Ambulance, or you know, any type of first aid program, first aid courses, counselors at school, school nurses, hospitals, any type of medical facilities will have them, and harm reduction spots. Right. Okay. So whether downtown or any other hubs within your community, right? I strongly advise. So you have that knowledge, not just about giving compressions and mouth to mouth, but to learn that could save someone's life.
I had no idea. I had no idea even what that was. So that's I think for the audience, that's a big one. That's a big one. I think you just my camera hit a max on that. I want to go back to that moment where you were talking about how you brought in some of the some drugs at the rehab center, the narcotics, and you gave some to your roommate, and that was his last hit that caused him to overdose. Do you feel responsible to this day about what happened, and is there any guilt that you struggle with today? That's
a great question.
Tough question.
Yeah, it's like my roommate who passed away due to me giving him the narcotics in the treatment center. I carried around a lot of guilt, right? A lot of guilt, but I've worked through that in the aspect of, like, as long as I stay clean, it was meant to happen in my life to shock me into recovery so that I can help other addicts or help other people that are, struggling with the disease of addiction, and then at the same time help other mothers not bury their children.
Fantastic.
Right? So that's a huge motivational aspect for me.
Right.
I don't want to become another statistic.
Right.
Or have my mother bury me, right?
Right. The reason why I asked that is because, a lot of times when somebody, that type of weight that someone puts on in terms of guilt can be a reason that causes them to fall into this type of space.
Guilt,
so if that,
shame, and,
yeah. And it's remorse. So interesting that for you was the wake-up call that pulled you out. You know what I mean? Such a crazy story. But so thank you for answering that, by the way. I know that was a tough question, not easy to deal with.
That's a good question. Thank you.
Now, I want to, I have to ask you this. 2 questions. One is this: you've pulled yourself out. It's an absolutely incredible story, I think, and because of the depths that you were in there, and knowing how difficult it is to there's addictions in all aspects of life. You know what I mean? A lot of people go through, they're struggling with different forms of addiction. Cigarettes, you mentioned sex addiction, all these different type of addictions that exist. But personally, this is just my personal opinion, I don't know if there's a tougher one to come out of than narcotics because of the fact that you're here today. And by the way, you look amazing. And I mean, considering some of the stories that, you've told me off camera, the fact you look like this, you got some superhuman body. But I gotta ask you, man, for someone, you've pulled yourself out of this, right? What do you think the difference is between someone who goes through this, the depths of it? Because some people pull out and some people don't. What's the dividing line here? Why do you think, if we can do it maybe in a short, I know it's a big question,
That's a massive
for a very,
question.
very tight time frame, but maybe in like a minute or less, if you want to touch on, like, if you had to put it down, what's the dividing line? What gets someone out of it like you did, and what keeps someone going all the way right to the grave?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, because like some people never get that opportunity or the chance of getting the right help, getting the right people in front of them, right? Or hearing a message of hope. Right. People think that once they're in that,
make it a little easier then.
Yeah.
Two people that have gone through they've gotten the help, they have the support, because we know scenarios like this also exist where they have the same level of support and help. One makes it out, one doesn't. What's going on there, you think? For someone that's been in it and pulled out.
I still ask the same question, because I've had friends that passed away in the last couple of years. We've gone to a lot of funerals and a lot of weddings. Right? But like I ask myself, I'm like, how come that person didn't make it? How come I made it? Right? Sometimes you get the survivor's guilt. Right? And it is sad, but it's basically this disease does not, like, I'll reemphasize, does not discriminate. So the person A and person B doing it could literally be a lapse of judgment. And now with the opioid or fentanyl, the hard drugs that are out there, you could be clean for a couple of months or even a year or a couple of years. And all of a sudden one time you're like, you get this bright idea or have a couple of drinks, or, I could use one more time, grab that drug, or just the mom and pop that are just getting cocaine, like the regular thing that they get once in a blue moon, and it's all laced with fentanyl. They don't get that chance to come back anymore. Like the drugs are a lot more illicit, a lot more harder, and very fatal, right? So that's the main difference between person A and person B. Back in the day, person A and person B could make it because person B, who keeps slipping, can eventually get it. But now person B keeps slipping, he's dead.
Interesting.
Doesn't get a chance to make it back, unfortunately, right? So it's definitely
that is a tough question. I do agree with you. And I know it was a loaded question, especially asking you to do it 1 minute or less. Okay, so close out then. I just want you to, if you could speak to somebody today that's in the pit of what you went through, and if somebody could maybe have said something to you that you think would have helped out, if you could, let's say you're speaking to someone in a minute or less, if you could tell them one or two things that you think that might trigger something, what would you say to them, if you could say anything at all?
There's hope. There's hope. And like, obviously you can go deeper into it, but when you see someone down in the bottom of their bottoms and you look down in a hole and they're down there, you're just like, you know what? For me, I'm the kind of guy, I'll jump down there and be like, let's go, I'll pull you up. Like this is what was shown to me. This is how someone gave me hope. Let me show you how to get out of this hole.
Right.
And it's up to that person to, follow the simple instructions or simple guidelines that I was shown, right? Which is mainly the 12-step programs at the beginning. And then my spiritual journey unfolded through that process. But, just when a person is in that darkness and you show them, hey, you know what, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, and now I'm on this side, that gives that person that little flicker of hope.
That is amazing. And sometimes that's all it needs.
That's all it needs. Is one addict helping another addict, or alcoholic helping another alcoholic, right? Because it's one thing to hear from a doctor, psychiatrist, family member, or, whatever type of professional. But when it's someone that's been in that pit where you're sitting, it makes that much of a difference, right? Yeah. So that's the main reason why I'm on this podcast right now. Or else I'd want to stay in the shadows and do my thing, right? But if this can wake one heart up, or put light into one person's darkness and hopefully change their life, which I pray it does, then that means sitting here with you tonight was a success.
Amazing. Yo, with that, man, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, and I'm honored to be here, bro. Thank you for having me.
100%, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Listen, if you made it this far, like and subscribe. If you hung around for the entire conversation, I want to thank...
Hit that like button.
I want to thank JR for coming on the show. I have to tell you, man, this is definitely not an easy conversation to have, to share these stories. These are, to open up that level, that deep, it's very, very difficult to do because there's a lot of shame, a lot of guilt associated with these things. And I know everybody can relate to that on some level. I know everyone can relate to many of the things. You don't have to go through deep struggles with narcotics to relate to what you were talking about. And I know, so when you say, you're on the show to maybe hope and help someone, for someone that can be helped and is looking to be helped, they were helped today because of sharing your story. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I can tell you this, this ain't the last time. If you're going to accept an invitation again, man, I'd love to have you back on because there's so much that you discussed. There's so much more that we can open up to on this conversation. So thank you again for coming on the show.
No, brother.
And we'll have you back.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.
The journey inwards is the doorway to every source of freedom imaginable. But to go inwards is going to require one thing. Everything you've got. My name's Hussein, and this is the Everything You've Got podcast.